A controversial topic that has been widely discussed over the last 7 months has been the many variants that exist of the torch pose department, ranging from spreadsheets and charts fans have made to track which edition contains what, to the arguments over the fairness of Taylor's tactics when it comes to these releases, or even the confusion over why they exist at all while the anthology was still confined to streaming. It's been a contentious topic that seems to finally have led up to the latest release of what seems to be the most definitive edition of Taylor's 11th studio album. Welcome to Swiftly Spoken, a fan-made Taylor Swift podcast in which we break down her lyrics, deep dive into full album retrospectives, and theorise about what may be coming next. As always, we are your hosts Cameron and Lisa, and this week we're going to be talking about every single edition that Taylor has released of the Torch Poets department, discussing why there are so many, the differences between each of them, and then finally breaking down the upcoming release of the long-awaited Anthology physical edition.
Before we go into all of the versions of TTPD, it's important to look over a little bit of Taylor's history with editions of albums, and in general the history of how people have put out different editions of one same album throughout musical history, really. So firstly, Taylor has always released different editions of the same album. Many might think that the high number of editions only started in the folklore era or Midnights, but truly, it can be traced right back to Debut, because Debut had many different variants and versions, though not in the same way as we have variants and versions nowadays. Back then, it was the kind of same packaging, but with different content.
So it was often like Best Buy version or a Walmart version that maybe would have like a bonus link that would take you to get like an extra track, and often the physical look of the CD wasn't really any different other than maybe like a sticker or something like that. Whereas nowadays that's obviously changed, but back then it was more like different shops had different. It might have potentially come with an extra disc on the back that had like a DVD on it. There was a version of Fearless, the original version, that is like that, and sometimes more regional stuff. But yeah, it was often that they were packaged the same way, but each shop had its own kind of little quirk that was to encourage people to buy that version from them. You know, Walmart made a quirk that made you want to go buy that version from them, or Best Buy or something like that. It was almost like little deals that kind of went along. Or Starbucks, for example, there was Starbucks versions of Taylor's albums, which again were packaged slightly differently, but were the same cover, same content. It was just more that it encouraged people to go to Starbucks, so the Starbucks made a bit of money on it.
With that in mind, this episode really could be about any of Taylor's albums in a way. Some have more to say about them than others, because like you said, some were just literally like repackaging same content in the end, so not much point of saying too much about them. But the thing is, she has always been like experimental with releases and done limited releases and collaborated with different places to release different versions of one same album. Mostly this is done firstly just to make each release different and fun, and secondly, of course, to sell albums. That's the point, right? It makes sense. That's why we always have like a standard versus a deluxe edition. Also, because that way the standard can be culled down to a very specific track list, and the deluxe edition can give us extra content that perhaps was left off for good reason, or perhaps was left off because of time constraints. There's always a different reason. With Taylor, usually that standard edition is very curated, whereas deluxe editions really do add a lot of colour to the picture. As time went on, Taylor did do different kinds of packaging and different variants and versions of albums. One that stands out in my mind is the 1989 deluxe edition with the Polaroids. I think is a hard topic to breach, but I think this is the most egregious edition because it was a lottery and luck aspect to it.
Yeah, this and Reputation was the same with the posters.
True, yes.
That were inside, and it was definitely down to luck. I remember, especially Reputation, the amount of number 1 and 2 posters that I would get was very frustrating, and in the end it was almost like you had to seek out by resell almost to find, you know, all the different Polaroids. Otherwise you were going to have to buy so many that you were never too sure what you were getting. Whereas now, obviously, because they are different covers and stuff like that, you know what you're getting. You can seek out that version rather than, you know, say you want Polaroids edition number 14 to 26 or whatever. To find that in HMV on release day was like, well, you just got to pick one and go with it.
That's it.
Yeah. So no, at the time I remember there being a lot of discussion about that it was kind of unfair that they weren't marked in any way that distinguished them, because it was almost like a kind of, you know, Lego minifigure. You opened it up and see what you got.
That's it. It was like a surprise pack kind of thing, which again, it is a strategy to sell more albums. I get it, but I do think that is one of the strategies that I find much cheekier. I don't know, I don't like it as much.
And also, I think in a way it almost actually works negatively, because people aren't sure, like I said, because people aren't sure what they're buying. You're like, oh, well, I don't want to buy 5 and then end up with 4 that are the same. So you might then think, okay, I'll buy a couple and then buy the others, you know, from eBay where I can see what the pictures are. Whereas selling them and making them all distinctly visible that a customer can go, I'm going to buy all 4 because I know that they are all going to be different. I guess then it kind of works in different ways. But I think that this was an early tentative way of... Nowadays, albums have all sorts of different covers. Whereas back in the day, it was very much like you had that standard album cover and you had a deluxe album cover, and there wasn't really, you know, an alternate version or a Urban Outfitters cover and an Amazon Prime cover and, you know, a store exclusive, you know, whereas now the covers is kind of what sells them. But back then it was kind of like people were dipping their foot in trying these new marketing tactics.
That's it. It's a different strategy. It's a creative strategy, but in my opinion, not the fairest of them all. With Folklore, I think that is when there was quite a big shift. Obviously, Reputation and Lover had their own quirks. They had the books and the magazines. Reputation, like you said, did lean into that 1989 aspect of it with the posters. But the magazines, I thought, were an amazing way to package albums in a completely different way, but at the same time also present content that really, really does go with that album. That is probably my favourite type of release, where we have like a deluxe with a like extra special thing to it. Those Reputation magazines probably were my favourites.
And the Lover Diaries were like another level, I think, because of the content that you were getting. I think the thing that always frustrated me with those was the extra like blank pages that was like you were going to use it as a diary.
Right.
Like, as
I'm not going to touch
this. Write in this. It's like, yeah, I'm not. Please no. I would like more, you know, physical pages. But even what you got, so fascinating. Like those were the most fascinating thing. And on release day, I remember being in the car, like listening to the CD on the way back from HMV and like reading these. Even though I get incredibly car sick reading, I was so desperate to like read these diary entries, because it was like, wow, this is, you know, stuff that we didn't know, we hadn't ever known about. And they were so interesting and so fascinating. And I think, yeah, the Reputation magazines and the Lover Diaries, I think really, really were like solid. The Lover box set, a little bit of a miss, but
which is the version that I got originally back in the day, mostly because, and this is something that bugged me right back then, and this is one of the reasons that we're doing this episode really, is I just wanted a CD that contained like the most amount of things on it. Like I don't need to, I don't want to hunt down different things and like get 5 versions of the same CD, which, you know, in the end I was a clown because here I am with 5 versions of Midnights. But back then I was like, I just want the CD, the version with the CD that has the most stuff on it. And because that version did have the extra like Lover recording,
it had the voice memos.
But yeah, so that's the one that I wanted, and that's why I got the box set, which I the tote bag's cute.
Yeah, I've never, honestly, I came across it the other day when I was home, and I was like, God, I've never ever touched this. Like those little tattoos are still sat in their little package.
Oh no, I was never.
The pop socket, I've never ever touched the pop socket. So that one, I feel like, in comparison, obviously we'll get into them, in comparison to what was then included in the Torch Poets like box things, which was so much cooler. That again was still kind of early days. Like even the tote bag was like someone just printed that album cover on. They're like, yeah, shove it in a box. Back on track. The Lover Diaries, really solid. I thought they were really, really, really good. They were very expensive. And I remember at the time being like, oh my God.
Yeah.
But they were really, really like, the content you got was like of high quality.
And the thing is, the strategies have changed over time because the music industry has changed over time. Obviously, right back in the day, it was easier to sell different editions of one standard album because people would go to shops to buy an album. And then obviously with the rise of digital formats and downloading things off of iTunes or whichever provider you wanted to download off of, and things becoming more digital, with 1989, she did have to do something like that to kind of convince people to not stray away from also a physical edition, and maybe even more than one.
Yeah, definitely. And I think because even though obviously streaming now is so integral, buying a physical album, and I don't know if it does come down to this, but say it's down to like points. Say like if I stream the song, it's like 1 point. But if I buy the CD or download it off iTunes and pay for it, it might be worth 150 points, you know? So like it will take me 150 times to make what it's worth buying it. So it means that, encouraging people to do that is, how they had to do it. And that was when, you know, we were kind of moving into that more digital. And also we had an issue a lot, especially kind of early part of Taylor's career, with like illegal downloading was so like, you know, things like LimeWire and stuff like that, which was so popular that, again, encouraging people to go out and buy physical was by them including cool little things like, you know, voice memos or a little extra DVDs, CD bonus on the back.
So then we flash forward to, like I said, Folklore, because Folklore is one that, again, is a strange one. During 2020, we are deep now in the streaming era. So anyone can just access that content straight away. However, here we have where things kind of like change up. Folklore we, number one, get an album that you can only have a track on in physical format for a long while, until eventually the Lakes then makes it onto digital formatting as well and streaming. But number two, Folklore had like all these different versions of exactly the same album with exactly the same tracks, just different versions of the photo shoot.
Yeah, I remember when it was announced, it was so overwhelming.
Yes.
Because it was like, oh my God, 8.
There's 8.
And obviously it was 8 because it was the eighth album, and it was very, very overwhelming. Thankfully they all came out at once, whereas
that is
often
true.
the issue with these is that they're staggered, so it means that you buy one thinking, oh, and it's supposedly
will I like another
release,
one
however,
more? Will I like another one less? Yeah,
exactly. And then you often end up paying so much on shipping that it's like quite frustrating. But fair play, they did all come out at once, so you could buy them. And as ever, you are never entitled to buy all of them. It doesn't make you any more or less of a fan.
No.
It's more just a fun option, and like often, lots of people will just pick the cover that they like the most, or the one that includes a certain thing they like the most, and
that is
uncle, they're fine.
The best way, honestly. That is
exactly.
The best way
I wish I didn't feel like I had to complete stuff. But yeah, Folklore was like quite overwhelming, and interestingly, because obviously we're in the midst of COVID, that CD didn't come out till like a week later, so you couldn't even go into store and buy it on that initial release week. It was all streaming. It was that second week, because I remember, or at least in the UK, the first time I ever heard the Lakes was like on some dodgy live stream where someone was like playing it from their CD player.
I remember that.
And yeah, I think we were both on it. We were, being like, oh my God. And that was my first version of like hearing the Lakes, because that was the only way you could hear it for a while, was on the tail end of the Folklore physical CD. That was Taylor's incentive of going out and buying it. I think because of COVID, the like releases weren't as impressive as including, Polaroids or cool books and stuff, I guess, because of production, whereas like just having different pictures in the CD, all you're doing is printing, shoving it in a jewel case and sending it out. But yeah, because the only difference there was purely the pictures, but it was still quite cool to feel like you kind of had
that's it, you could get
the photo shoot.
A personalized version which you liked the most, which I thought was good because it showed like different facets of the album. However, it was quite underwhelming considering what we had just got previously. Again, understandably so, because of the situation which we were in and how that album kind of like came to be. But at the same time, in comparison, then we have Evermore, Fearless Taylor's version and Red Taylor's version, and none of them get any special treatment. We don't have any kind of like special editions. We don't have any standard deluxe.
Exactly. I always find that weird how some get special treatment and others don't. And like you said, like Evermore literally just got like a CD, and then there was like a couple of vinyl variants, a Target, and a standard. There's variations within the standard where, depending on where they're pressed on the vinyl.
Right.
Some
but it's not really like
than others, but technically
it is the same one.
Not a different variant.
Right.
And Red, had some signed versions, but otherwise was just the standard CD. Fearless, again, a couple of signed versions, and a Target CD that had like a poster, but nothing really that major
compared to what we had just got with Folklore.
Exactly. And even like Speak Now Taylor's version, coming off the back of Midnight's, 1 CD, 3 vinyl, that was kind of it. And
a
then
little limited digital
1989
moment,
which was then 4 versions, one's with Polaroids, one with posters.
This is it.
That made 8, it's mad.
Yeah, so this is it. So she's always had different variants and vinyl editions, CD editions, but I think it's with Midnight's that things get out of hand, and then the Tortured Poets department, as we're about to get into, like things really get out of hand, like
wild.
for real.
Yeah.
But with Midnight's, it combines a lot of these previous ideas that we had. So we have like a standard version, we have an alternate photo shoot versions, but with the same tracks. I like the idea of there being a incentive, like you can turn it over and it becomes a clock when you put them all together. Same thing for 1989 really with the 1989. I like those ideas. Yep. Then we obviously have that deluxe version with Hits Different, which is like a Target thing. And then we had new editions with different songs. Some were only digital, some were physical. And there was a frustration of there not ever being one edition with everything. It is frustrating how that happened with Midnight's. We still haven't got one physical edition with absolutely everything. And there isn't even a digital edition with absolutely everything. No, because
there's still You're Losing Me is technically a single on streaming. It's not part of the album. It's frustrating. There's always something missing.
I think Midnight's is another album that we could definitely do this type of episode with, just to try and go over it and make sense of it all and understand like what is where. But because this is the most relevant, and because finally we are getting an anthology physical version, finally we are able to get into all of the versions of the Tortured Poets Department.
As Lisa said, obviously the Tortured Poets Department follows in the footsteps of Midnight's, and throughout the last few months different versions have slowly been released in order to basically help the album stay number one on the charts and Taylor to kind of break her own and other artists' chart records. So I guess there's a lot of discussion around this, especially online, with how fair this is and whether it's kind of slimy and maybe a bit money hungry, chart hungry, manipulating fans a little bit in kind of helping your own gain. And I think there's a lot of discussion around that. I'm not necessarily saying I agree with those things, but how do you feel about it, Lisa? I know there's kind of a lot of, and there is always a lot of very differing opinions.
Everyone can have different opinions, that's absolutely fine. I think there's a few things that we will like touch base on and we have already mentioned. First and foremost, I think the most important thing is that to say that releasing so many versions of an album does cause pressure on fans, especially those that are collectors and want to have like full collections of everything. It's a lot of pressure to spend a lot of money to search for all these different editions, and that should never be the case. No one should ever feel like that. It should just be a fun thing that you're involved in, a fun hobby. If you want to get one edition, if you want to try and get multiple editions, it should always be what you like most, remembering that there will always be a way to access all of these songs somehow, right? Usually online and on streaming eventually. Beyond that, it always needs to be something that is fun for fans. It always needs to be something that each person has to take inventory themselves of what they can be involved with and what they can't, and not feel bad if you can't. If you even haven't bought one edition, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't make you less of a fan. Secondly, is now more of that is like the fan perspective, and now more for the chart perspectives. I don't think it's the end of the world, honestly. I don't know. For me personally, it's just how artists have always done this. Like, every artist is free to do the same thing, by the way, and they do. A lot of them do. And what I hate the most about some artists is that they will like go on tirades about, oh, this person is releasing all these editions and it's absolutely disgusting, and then you turn around and look at their vinyl variants
and they've got 15 versions of their album,
and it's like, okay, so you're all in the same boat in the end. Is it the correct or right thing to do? Maybe not, but you're all in the same boat in the end.
And I think also it's often a label thing. You know, labels are pushing for it. At the end of the day, like, the music industry is a money-making industry. They're not, like, they have to make money, and they want their artists to be successful. They want those number one albums, you know, they want those kind of chart records. And, like, the label will be pushing for that because it has become a standard. You know, like, that is the standard, that there are multiple versions. Even smaller indie artists, or artists I kind of follow that don't have the biggest of following in comparison to, you know, Taylor or her kind of counterparts, they still release different versions to different places, to one, so that the album is widely accessible, and also to encourage people collecting and buying versions and all these different variants of things. And I think that it's a very complex thing, because obviously it kind of feeds into like overconsumption.
Oh, definitely.
And always raises questions about like the environment and things like that. And I think especially now, when things like that are at the forefront of people's minds, when you see, you know, 25 different versions, it's like, realistically, at the end of the day, you can only play one at a time. Like, you can only ever play one vinyl at a time. So there's always a discussion, well, what is the point of having 10? So it's very difficult. It's very, very contentious, but it has always been something in a way that artists have done, and I think historically it was done in a way that maybe wasn't as physically obvious, because with like old Billboard rules, they changed the rules, didn't they, about bundles and things. Yeah. So it's like, before, you could buy like a t-shirt on an artist's website and it would come with a digital download of the album, and that would count towards sales. And because that was quite sneaky, really, because obviously the consumer wasn't really aware of it, and they weren't spending any extra money, or there wasn't anything environmentally, you know, wrong or destructive by doing that. It was just a little bit of like a,
it's like sneakily added
under
in
table.
Here's also a digital album, make sure you download that as well, so it counts as a sale.
Exactly. There was, and I think the way it was being done was kind of a bit sneaky and maybe on the sly a little bit. So then that got changed, which then has also led to more physical editions, and also even things like Billboard rules around, it used to be that you could say pre-order a single, and all of those pre-orders would count for that first week, or, you know, the album, whereas now it has to ship for it to count. So it means that, you know, a lot of like CD singles and CD, you know, 7-inch vinyls and things like that have kind of dropped a little bit, because it might take a couple of months to produce that, and therefore what's the point when those sales are going to count for like 5 months down the line. So obviously that is a different, and these are like, we could sit here and talk about this for days. These are like very deep, in-depth music industry theories and analysis, but that's one. Obviously, album bundles was an old way that artists used to do it. Back in the iTunes digital era, the amount of times an album would be reduced to $4.99, or a single was, 39p or 49p, and that was a way that people would increase sales, was through that. But obviously now iTunes doesn't have the hold over people that it once did. And also, there has been a massive resurgence for physical product. Back in the day when we were moving towards streaming, it looked like CD and vinyl especially was on the decline and was basically dying breed, and vinyl shops and record stores were kind of basically going extinct. But since the resurgence of that in physical media, now there's almost more of a demand anyway for those products, and people are wanting to have a vinyl and wanting to have a CD.
Is a demand.
Cassettes I've never understood.
I know, I'm always surprised that
I think those are very much a collector. I feel like those are often a collector piece, because any cassette I've had is always like, I remember as a kid, it would always break and you'd have to put a pen
wind
in it
and all the rest of it.
It was way more hassle than it was worth. The sound quality wasn't that great, whereas vinyl, the sound quality is like one of the selling points. And I think Taylor has also been a kind of forefront in driving physical media, and especially vinyl, because I remember even when I used to go into record stores and stuff, they would never have Taylor, they would never have pop stuff, and I would always feel like an idiot if anyone asked me, what are you looking for? And I'd lie, I'd be like, Oasis?
No.
Because God forbid you'd look for Taylor, because they would look at you like, oh, as if we'd sell her. Whereas now, oh my God, record stores are crammed full of her because she sells, and at the end of the day, they have to make money.
And in the end, whenever she does promote anything nowadays, she's not promoting the CD version of it. She is promoting the vinyl version.
The vinyl. Yeah, because that is what people are wanting nowadays. CDs is kind of starting to become the dying brand nowadays. So I feel like there's so much going on that has changed the landscape of physical media and selling albums, that the reduction of our bundles, initial rise of iTunes and like digitally reducing price of stuff, and now the decline of that, and now the resurgence of physical, it's kind of culminated into this mass versions of vinyls basically, and now we're kind of 10, 8, 15 being the kind of standard, and it is just very overwhelming and very over consuming. And I think the reason why fans find that is because it's not like on the album announce, it's like, here's all the different versions, and you're like, okay, cool, I'll pick the best one. It's like on the album announce, here's 4 on my website. 2 weeks later, oh, here's Target's version. 3 weeks later, oh, here's HMV's version, and here's this. And it's like, oh, yeah, but I pre-ordered that one, but I didn't want that one. And I think that's where the frustration comes from with fans.
Definitely, yeah.
Because of that.
It's warranted. All of the discussions and controversies and conversations about this, they all make sense. It isn't right. It isn't 100% right. There is a bit of sketchiness going on. It is the landscape of the music industry currently. And that's why I said I think the most important thing is always to assess as a fan of someone, of whoever it is that you are listening to, and kind of like sit down with yourself and be like, right, it's my responsibility now to respond to this media that they are putting out in front of my face, and to act appropriately with those things in mind.
Being financially responsible.
Exactly,
and not putting yourself in debt or spending, unnecessary kind of money on things. And I think the problem is online, it seems like everyone's buying all of them and you feel like you're being left out. And I think the way that things are marketed now, it's like, if you don't get it within the next 2 hours, you're never going to see it again. And you're like, oh, that people jump on it. Whereas I think that it probably will be available again. It's probably going to be quite widely available. And yeah, it is what it is. And I don't mean any of what I'm saying in a kind of attack of any artist or Taylor at all, because I love collecting. I'm a collector at heart. Like, if anyone has kind of come to this podcast from my Taylor socials, you'll know that I am a nuts Taylor Swift collector. Like, I love collecting stuff. It's just kind of who I am. I'm a big collector of just everything and anything. So I love it, and I love different versions and variants, but I can also still admit when it is overwhelming and a bit like, oh my god, there's so many. And I think especially when they do feel incomplete, I think that's the frustration, is often when it's like Midnights especially is the one where it's like there's no version that is complete.
I know.
Which is really frustrating. But with the upcoming release of Torture Poets Anthology, that is quite exciting, because for once it's like, okay, are we going to get everything all in one?
It seems that way, right? But we're going to go through it and we'll see. So what we're going to be doing now is going over the general variants promoted by Taylor Nation or Taylor herself for the Tortured Poets department. We're not going to be looking at like different regional variants. Like, there's always amazing Japanese editions, for example, but we're not going to go into all of that, because that would really, like, we'd be here for way too long.
That's a minefield. That's another like 10 years worth of episodes.
And realistically, those are made specifically for different audiences. So we're going to be looking at the ones that specifically are made for, let's say, ourselves, really, the audience that is probably here, you know, Europeans, Americans, something like that. What is interesting though with those Japanese editions is that they are always so much more curated. Even like back in the day, you get like little bits of merch with them. They will be like a different design to them. The case will be different, or they'll have like even more bonus material. And that is because this type of packaging has been done by a lot of Asian artists for a long time, like K-pop artists especially, have done these marketings of albums to great success. It's just a norm. Like they'll have like different variants of an album.
They have the
different
coolest
colours,
versions.
different photo shoots for each of the variant of the album, and like different feel to each of them.
K-pop, J-pop artists and stuff have always been like in another league in terms of like releases and like the effort that gets put into, you know, it's never just like a CD jewel case, like a plastic normal case. It's in these like really cool books or like in a tin case, or, you know, and there's always been a big push of the photo cards, and that's kind of, and often the photo cards are worth more than the physical CD, and that's what fans are after, is to collect all the photo cards. And I think because of that, because those markets are so used to having these like amazing editions with really, really cool bonus content, like Evermore, for God's sake, it came with like a whole plastic stand-up calendar. You know what I mean? It was like, what?
I know. Evermore, who was given nothing in
but in Japan had this unreal version. But because of that, it means that like Western artists obviously are marketing and having to compete against those amazing versions, that they themselves then release these really cool versions in those regions, because that's the standard and that's the norm, which I'm so jealous of, because they're so cool. And, you know, it's not even just Taylor. All sorts of artists release like the coolest versions of different countries, and there's all sorts it's weird how different countries do randomly get these really cool, unique random editions. Like there's a French version of Red with that bonus DVD.
That is literally my dream. On my like top of my wish list is that Red Live on the Seine edition.
Yes,
a dream. Such a good edition.
I remember when I bought it, it was like, this is like
the holy grail.
Yes, because that is like solid, and it's so random. You know what I mean?
It really is.
Random.
Just a random French edition.
But yeah, there's so many versions, and I feel like I'm quite knowledgeable on it. I feel like I know a lot, but even I sometimes think, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was a Singapore version of this or an Australian version of this that comes in a, you know, plastic sleeve, or, you know,
this is it, with a minimal change, but an interesting one nonetheless. But what we're going to be going over, like we said, are just like the general variants that have been promoted mostly by Taylor Nation over the last few months of the Tortured Poets department.
So kicking us off is what is kind of deemed the standard, I suppose, but its official name is the manuscript, which the cover is the cover that we would know as the kind of standard version of Tortured Poets, with that white cover and Taylor kind of led on what looks like a bed. So this has a couple of different types. There is a digital version of this, which is widely available on streaming and iTunes. But in terms of physical, there are quite a few versions of this one. So there's obviously the standard vinyl, which is like a bone white vinyl, and it's the standard track list of the Tortured Poets with the manuscript on the end. There's also a phantom clear version, the same track list as the standard, again with the manuscript on the end. But this one in the States was a Target exclusive, but regionally is available in like HMV or other places. So that's the vinyl for this one. There's then a couple of CD versions. So there's kind of the standard CD, as you'd call it, which comes with a poster. There's then the special edition CD, which is in that like double box that comes with some photo cards, iron-on patch, magnet, and like a little bookmark. And then there's also a signed version, which comes with a signed picture of Taylor, as well as a cassette. So the manuscript has quite a few versions. Out of those versions, which one is your kind of favourite?
So out of all of like these original 4 edition versions, all of them have special editions, and those are my favourites. They just are like the pinnacle of everything kind of like brought together. They're different versions, but each one has a different song, which I know, again, a lot of people think that that's really a terrible tactic to kind of sell, but I'd rather they have a different song than just like Midnight's a different cover. At least I got a different song with each one, so at least there's that.
And also then the anthology was then widely available anyway, so it wasn't that these songs were like locked to their version anyway.
They were available from that very first moment.
I just loved how kind of creative those special editions felt, with the kind of in the boxes with like magnets and patches and things like that, and even the card and stuff. Everything felt quite high quality.
It did, and it felt very like themed very well to its era. I was very excited to get all those patches
with the artifacts.
It did feel like you were opening evidence. I was very surprised when it was like a double kind of album, like stuck together. I was like, have they sent me 2 albums right now? And then I realized when I opened it up, and it has like specific placement for all of these things. I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a nice way to have a special edition that included different things, not just a different cover, but like a different song, and then different things inside of that as well. So I thought that was very exciting, and that is my favourite version for all of these,
Definitely. So then the next version is the Bolter, which is the kind of version with a beige cover, and this one again has a couple of different versions. This one is only really on physical, so there's the original standard edition, I suppose, which is the one with the poster. There's then the standard vinyl for the Bolter, as well as the special edition CD, which is similar to the manuscript with all the kind of artifacts and evidence, as well as a cassette. Similarly, there's also the Albatross, and this is like the one with a kind of grey poster with Taylor kind of with like the horizon on the background and Taylor looking into the camera, and this is exactly the same as the Bolter. It has the CD with the poster, the vinyl, the special edition box set CD, as well as the cassette. And to round off these kind of initial versions of the Torture Poets, we have the Black Dog, which is the one which has the cover of the Anthology, but we obviously didn't know that at the time, so it's a bit of confusion over that. But in terms of physical, this one only does come with the Black Dog. It doesn't come with any of the Anthology tracks. And again, this one has the CD poster, the vinyl, the special edition CD box set, and cassette. And yeah, all of these are the standard track lists with the name of the version being the additional songs. So obviously the manuscript, the Bolter, the Albatross, and the Black Dog all being on their own retrospective version.
And then, like you mentioned, something that really bothered me with the Anthology version, which of course was like revealed to us on that same day that TTPD did come out a few hours later. It has only been digital up until now, which we'll get into at the end of this long list. But what really got to me is that it was the same photo as the Black Dog, just like zoomed out a little bit and with a different lining and obviously wording at the top saying that it was the Anthology edition. But it annoyed me so much. Like, why would you repeat one photo?
I know.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
Oh.
And I think I remember on the release, some people were confused that the Black Dog variant was the Anthology.
Right, and it's two different things. Yeah.
But they're all it has is the Black Dog. That's the only additional track. There's none of the other Anthology tracks on there. And yeah, no, it did annoy me and was a bit frustrating. And I think again, what was good was that at least these songs were all together. You know, you didn't have to buy
and available for everyone, like straight away.
Available for absolutely everyone, yeah, straight away. And it did feel quite overwhelming because it was like I thought we were only going to have to find like 4 little bonus tracks, but there was now another 15. But I've always loved this cover. This has always been one of my favourite covers. Out of these initial ones, that Black Dog / Anthology cover was my favourite, so I did love that kind of became like an official cover that was on streaming.
So this is the Anthology, which is only on digital and includes the standard 16 tracks and then 15 extra tracks that of course include, like you said, those 4 previous exclusive tracks, so the manuscript, the Bolter, the Albatross, and the Black Dog. And that was the fullest version of this album that we had for a very long time, only on digital. And people have been asking for a physical release for a very, very long time. Finally, we're about to get that very soon, so that's good at least.
Okay, so now we start to move into when it all gets a little bit more complex, and there's all sorts of different weird and wonderful versions. So next we're going to move into the acoustic versions. So these versions are all physical, and they were CDs, no vinyl, purely just one CD. And basically the only difference was that they were that standard track list all the way to Clara Bow with one additional bonus track, which was an acoustic version of one of the standard tracks. So starting off was the But Daddy I Love Him acoustic version of Torture Poets, and this was the one with that gorgeous photo of her with the flower kind of looking down. It was a white cover, and this one was quite widely available across Taylor's UK, US and a couple of international stores, and seems like it was just like a bit of a fun bonus one and that this wasn't going to be a recurring pattern. However, there then went on to be a couple more versions. So there's the Guilty as Sin acoustic version, which again, standard track list with Guilty as Sin tagged onto the end. Again, a really gorgeous cover of Taylor kind of with like a sheet. Next, there is the Down Bad acoustic version. Again, just CD, just Down Bad acoustic slapped on the end. There was then also a Fortnite acoustic version, which this one I really, really loved this cover. It's like black with a still from the Fortnite music video of Taylor and Post in the kind of silhouette of Taylor's, and again, standard track list, just Fortnite acoustic slammed on the back. And then finally there's the Fresh Out the Slammer version, which again has a really cool kind of moody cover of Taylor like looking into the distance, with again standard track list just on the CD, Fresh Out the Slammer. So these versions from Guilty as Sin all the way down to Fresh Out the Slammer, so Guilty as Sin, Down Bad, Fortnite and Fresh Out the Slammer, were only available on like Taylor's US store, and you couldn't really buy them if you were an international fan. I tried and it just was like locked. You had to do the like post service where you post it to a US address, and I thought, I can't be asked. So I only actually have the But Daddy I Love Him version out of these, because the others seemed a little bit harder to get, and I think this was also when people were starting to get a little bit frustrated with the amount of versions, and it was starting to seem a little bit more cash grabby. So I think this was when the kind of discussion around versions was starting to get a little bit
especially
heated.
because they are all physical. So for people who like to collect, it is a bit annoying when you can't get your hands on the things that you want to, and there's so many of them, which is, it's getting a bit out of hand at this point. And the only difference is that, yes, we have these acoustic versions tacked on to the end, but they were also very difficult. Like you said, you could only get them really if you was in the US, because they were made for one purpose, really, which was to count for the charts in the US. So
yes,
it was very
and I think
frustrating.
also the kind of packaging and stuff was also, in comparison to the things like the box sets, which were really, really cool, quite high quality, these felt very cheap and rushed. Rather than a CD booklet, that cover was purely just like a sheet of paper with just like image printed on the front, image, no physical booklet. They felt quite cheap and rushed, and as you said, there was a purpose for them. And also, unfortunately, often with acoustic versions of Taylor's tracks, sometimes the acoustic versions are banging, State of Grace or like Forever and Always piano version, where they are like kind of redone.
Well, this is it. That's it, isn't it? They have been re-recorded. Like, she's gone in and done another take with the vocals, right?
Yep. Whereas these versions were purely just like someone had just like taken off the drums and just left a guitar. They didn't really feel very like, they feel a bit empty and lost, because like Taylor's vocal is for like a full track, not an acoustic track. So they often feel a little bit kind of like, I don't know, I always find they fall a bit flat. Very rarely do these acoustic versions kind of live up to either the original version, or do I ever really listen to them? Because
this is it. It's such a shame.
They feel like demos, but not in a cool, interesting way.
No, not in a good way. It's such a shame because we had so many good ones, like you said, State of Grace, Forever and Always. Those are like the two best ones, obviously. But then even like All Too Well, 10-minute version, Sad Girl Autumn version, recorded at Long Pond Studio Sessions, whatever. I really loved that version because, again, it's a different take. Her vocals have been re-recorded. I know that obviously means it's a lot more work. You don't just like, have to rearrange different vocals that have already been done, but it really does make a big difference, such a big difference in the quality of a song and the feeling
of it. It really does. And I think also the replay value, like obviously these are two, I suppose with the physicals, once it's sold, but especially on streaming, like I never really go back to those versions, whereas for example Sabrina Carpenter released an acoustic version of Please Please Please, which is a different take. Like she's recorded it with her singing acoustically, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And I actually go back and listen to that when I'm in the mood to listen to that song, but maybe in a more chilled environment. I play that so much more because it is different, and it does feel like you're listening to something different, or it feels like a live version, or like more
That's
of a rough take.
It does feel like a different kind of thing that you want to go back to, whereas these do feel like, well, it's the same song really, but now you've just kind of like toned down the production part to it. It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit.
The vocal always feels a bit echoey, I always find, because obviously often it still has all the effects.
Right.
Like Lavender Haze I always find, the Lavender Haze acoustic version I always find really weird. Because it's got that kind of, or the anti-hero one as well, I find, because it's got that effect but doesn't, I don't know. And the thing is Taylor is obviously an incredibly busy woman, so I'm not expecting her to go in and record all these again.
But then again, if you want to sell us 5 physical versions,
but yes, if you want me to listen, I would listen to ones that are
and
like
I would
State of
seek
Grace.
out these versions more if it was something like that. But yeah. Thankfully, from now on, all the rest of them were only ever like digital purchases. So at least there's that. Is it the best thing in the world that there are so many more to go through? No. But at least they are only digital. Like collectors that do want to collect physical things, I don't think will feel the pressure to collect all of these digital ones. One way or another, they are available.
So the next lot is the voice memos. So these I as we said, we both love voice memos, and I love it when we do get these, and I find them really, really interesting, and I find these a lot more interesting than the acoustic versions.
For sure. I wish these had been the physical versions. I would have sought these out to get them much more than the other ones, which I'm not interested in getting any, to be honest.
Definitely. And often with these kind of physical versions, they're often, again, locked to the US store, often slightly reduced to encourage people to buy them. Often, once one person's kind of bought them, the bonus track, whatever it is, does circulate. They're often quite easy to find. We first have the Who's Afraid of Little Old Me first draft voice memo version. Again, standard track list with just the memo of Who's Afraid of Little Old Me. Quite a cool cover. I do quite like the cover. It's like Taylor looking into the mirror. It does feel very Who's Afraid of Little Old Me.
Yeah, that one really does fit.
They chose the cover well. Next, we have the Cassandra first draft phone memo version. Again, purely digital, standard track list with Cassandra voice memo shoved on the end. Again, quite a cool cover. I think it's quite nice as well. We often get to see pictures that we hadn't really seen.
That is true. Versions. It's one of the good things that comes out of all of this, is that you do see kind of like little outtakes of different photos sometimes.
Next, we have the Black Dog first draft voice memo version. Again, standard track list, digital, with just Black Dog slammed on the end. Again, I really like the cover of this one. It's kind of Taylor in the dark looking over her shoulder. And finally, we have the My Boy Only Breaks His Favourite Toys first draft phone memo version. Again, digital, standard track list with My Boy Only Breaks His Favourite Toys voice memo put on the end of the track list. Again, a really cool cover of kind of Taylor with her arms up, led on a bed. Out of these ones, was there any... and even with the acoustics, actually, out of the acoustics, was there a version that you preferred? And with these voice memos, was there a version that stood out?
The acoustics, I couldn't even tell you. I think I listened once and was like, okay, that's fun. So I don't really know.
Probably I'd say Fortnite was quite fun.
Yeah.
That was probably the only one that was like, cool.
Yeah. I just think like some of the choices for the acoustics were a bit strange as well, because like Down Bad works so much better with the full production.
Yeah. But then I suppose lots of the other songs are quite acoustic anyway.
Yeah, that is true. I guess, But Daddy I Love Him, that was quite a good version as well. I quite liked that arrangement, to be honest. It made it feel very much more country in a way. It felt very fearlessy. So I'm glad about that. From the voice memos, now these are interesting. And I think what's important about doing this episode as well, along with having our conversation about how this works and why it is a thing, I think it's very easy to miss out on one of these versions that was dropped for a few hours on one day randomly over the last few months. So for anyone who hasn't listened to all of these voice memos, as Cameron said, they do circulate out there, so that it's not hard to find them. And they're so interesting. I love them. I know we always go on about this, but these are the behind the scenes of Taylor's craft that we love to see, be it in the Lover Diaries, be it on voice memos, be it with interviews or little like written out lyrics where she scribbled out a word, but you can still see what it says underneath, and you can bet that we will be going deep diving into it. And these are some of my favourite bits of content, honestly. I love them all. I think the Who's Afraid of Little Old Me one is really interesting. I think the Black Dog one is very interesting. But I think my favourite one out of them all is My Boy Only Breaks His Favourite Toys.
Yes,
for those lyric changes. Yes. He was my best friend, and that was the worst part. It hurts even more.
It reminds me of like the Cardigan voice memo with
or
like,
Gorgeous,
bird
originally
cage,
recording with I go through phrases when it comes to love.
Yes. I find these fascinating, and I wish we had like
all of them.
The Taylor Swift Now like Reputation ones where we could see them like being developed and had all of them, because I find them
I'm so good.
Fascinating. These, like I said, as a true fan of like Taylor's craft and songwriting and music, are valuable.
For sure.
These are interesting.
These are interesting additions. I completely agree with you. I
always love these.
Getting bits like this. Yeah, definitely.
Finishing off with the voice memos, we then have the next category of Torture Poets versions, which is the live versions. So these were released on the international leg of Eras Tour and are performances from across them. So we start off with the Love of My Life Live from Paris digital version. Again, this was only available on Taylor's store. It's digital, standard track list with just the Live from Paris on the end. Similarly, we also have the My Boy Only Breaks His Favourite Toys Live from Paris. Again, Taylor store, digital, standard track list, just My Boy. Then we also have the Alchemy mashed with Treacherous Live from Paris. Again, digital, standard track list with this shoved on the end. And that was the first batch that we got, which was again really exciting. I really love these versions, because it means we get like a crisp, clear audio.
Yeah, I love that they do provide us with the really high quality audio of whoever's recording at these venues. It's definitely nice to hear, especially for, there's a lot of people who can't make it to the shows, a lot of people who couldn't watch the live streams. So I do appreciate that this is a way to at least be able to hear some of these really, really cool mashups, like the Alchemy and Treacherous one. That was such an interesting one.
I love that. That's one of my favourites. Yeah, I actually go back and listen to that and have created like a little playlist on my phone with all of these in, because again, they are really, really good. Here
we get into like the sketchiness of it all, because these were only available for a very short period of time, only on Taylor's store, basically done once again to be able to guarantee a nice flow of sales for that week to remain number one on Billboard. It makes sense, it's part of her job, but it is unfair to a lot of people who don't want to buy like an album every 2 days and just to listen to one new song.
Yes, and I think what's also interesting is that, people are often very hungry for live versions, and
yes,
often they are kind of kept back a little bit. But it was interesting that, again, the live versions are obviously only including any Torture Poets tracks, and how also these versions they weren't Torture Poets department like photo shoots, images that were the album covers. It was images of Taylor performing the songs as the cover. So I think, again, they're kind of slightly controversial, but at the same time way more valuable than the acoustic versions. The next batch was Guilty as Sin, Live from Stockholm version, which again, standard track list, digital, Taylor Store, Guilty as Sin on the end. How Did It End, Live from Stockholm, again, digital, Taylor Store, just that on the end of the track list, as well as Peter, Live from Stockholm, standard track list, that on the end, digital, Taylor Store. These were
Stockholm won. They won. They really did win, didn't they? How Did It End and solid. Peter and that rendition of Guilty as Sin? Yes.
Glad
we got them.
Solid.
Somehow.
Yes.
Yep.
They were very, very, very good. The next kind of round was Thank You, Amy, mashed with Mean, which was live from London, digital version, again Taylor Store, standard track list, just that on the end. The Albatross, mashed with Dancing with Our Hands Tied, live from Dublin, again digital, standard track list, Taylor Store. And I Hate It Here, mashed with The Lakes, live from Cardiff, again Taylor's Store, digital, standard track list. These were really good because they were like the mashups, which I quite liked. They really started, because we had one mashup with The Alchemy and Treacherous, but these were like really, really gorgeous, solid mashups. Like I Hate to Hear the Lakes.
That's such a good one. I
also really love the Thank You Amy Mean one, where she's like singing this song at Wembley.
Yes.
So these are really good fun. I really, really liked these, and yeah, I thought they were very valuable. And interestingly to note, the Thank You Amy one added the live version added like an extra element, I suppose, to the song and its history and meaning, I guess, because obviously the original track list, the way that it was spelled out, was obviously all lowercase bar the K, I and M capitalized. However, the live version Matter and Mean, what was actually capitalized was Y and E, which obviously spells yay, which is Kanye West's new name, I guess, whatever he's going by nowadays. Which I suppose was interesting, because these ones were released to kind of compete with his album release.
Yep.
So it was kind of a direct reference, which I suppose, like, at least Taylor was being honest what she was doing. Like, it was clear, these are to compete with him.
That is true. At least she said, yeah, I'm competing with you and I hope I can win. And here's a song dissing you in this case.
Or your ex-wife,
yeah, whatever. Yeah. So, yeah, I thought that was funny, to be honest. I know some people are like, oh, that's so petty, whatever, but I think it's funny.
Who cares? Who isn't petty? Come on.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then finally ending the live ones, we have The Prophecy, which was, I kind of almost went unbeknownst to me. I didn't even really see
this is it. It's very easy to miss out on one of these little live
Yes, because they're often released, in the
middle of the night.
Throughout the night or something.
Well, for us anyway.
Yeah, for us, yeah. And then often Taylor Nation's story is kind of deleted and taken down. It's never posted to a main feed. It's often an Instagram story, so it can be missed. So this one I did actually miss at the time, and was only like a couple of weeks later I was like, God, I didn't even realise that. And that was The Prophecy / Long Story Short, live from Leon, again, digital only, Taylor Store, standard track list with this on the end. So that kind of rounds up all the live versions. Out of these live versions then, which is your favourite?
Oh, there are a lot of good ones, aren't there? I Hate It Here with the Lakes.
Yes.
I love Peter and How Did It End, because they're some of my favourite songs anyway. The Alchemy and Treacherous. I really do like the mashup ones. I think they do add so much to the songs, and it makes it different, it makes it fresh, doesn't it? And it really reminds me of those moments of, you know, listening on the live streams. Again, I know some people were complaining like there's so many, whatever, but in a way, I really do hope that I really did hope, I don't think she's going to release any more now, but I did hope for the ones that I had heard in person to be released in high quality.
Me too. I know, I was like, please,
they never made it. But no, which ones are your favourite ones out of this list?
Again, similar to you, How Did It End? I Hate It Here, Mash with the Lakes. I love the way that Taylor, like, when she does mashups now, it's interesting how they've totally, that surprise song section of
it has
the tour has totally
evolved,
changed and like morphed. Yeah. Obviously, initially it was just like one piano, one guitar, like no mashing. Then we kind of got the mashing up, and then now we have like mashing and the songs merging into each other, and Taylor like changing up the lyrics and merging lyrics, and
she's creating a whole new type of song, really.
Exactly. And now she doesn't even perform her own song, she's singing Espresso, you know what I mean? So it's like
that's so funny.
You know, it totally changes, which I love. So, and it's interesting how these kind of display that, I think, with, you know, things like Love of My Life, and then merging into, you know, the Alchemy and Treacherous mashup, to then things like I Hate It Here, which is like the blending of two songs. So yeah, no, I think the ones that you mentioned are all my favourites as well, and live versions are always a favourite for me. And there's still a couple, I think, to be fair, like I said, the one that I missed, The Prophecy, I need to locate that somewhere and shove that in my playlist. Because that one definitely slipped away. But yeah, no, these again are very much like the voice memos. I think high value, love these. And to finish off, there is technically one more version of the Torch Poets, even though there's more of a...
This one was...
It's almost like a chapter.
This one, it is, you know, like a chapter. It really is. Yeah, it reminds me of that. But it really... it baited me so much. Like, for a second.
Fair play. They got me.
They got me. Yeah.
They got me. I clicked on it and I played it.
Right, because it is like a chapter because it is available like for streaming, whereas the other ones were available like to buy. Yeah.
Yeah, this one is not for purchase or anything like that. This is purely available on streaming, and it is the Torture Poets Department -TS, the Eras Tour set list, which was basically just a digital compilation with But Daddy I Love Him, So High School, Who's Afraid of Little Old Me, Down Bad, Fortnight, Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, and I Can Do It With a Broken Heart, which obviously is the Torture Poets Department set list, track list, whatever you want to call it, of the Eras Tour. And I think a lot of people thought that it was the live versions of, which obviously I'm so hungry for, because we've kind of got everything else.
Yeah, really, we can listen to the rest of it thanks to, you know, the streaming version of the film and people who have done the job of bringing us the MP3s. Yeah.
Exactly. And I think what's so weird is that, like, you know, like Cruel Summer, when they wanted that to go to number one and they released a couple of versions of it, they released the live version.
The live version. Because they know.
Because they know people love it.
They know we want it.
And it's so solid. Yeah. And I listen to it all the time. And it's just like, you know people want it. Like, just give them... Like, even if they release Torture Poets chapters with... the, you know, I Hate It Here / The Lakes, people would listen.
Oh yeah,
you know, like people would
definitely because people do want those. People love live versions of things, especially in high quality, because it really elevates the song for a start, and it gives us a fresh perspective on it. And a lot of people are waiting with bated breath for that TTPD set list, because obviously we haven't been able to see it in high quality or hear it in high quality. So this was really baiting.
I think I think it's definitely incoming. But no, these
I think so.
I've always found, and I think anyone that's kind of been listening for a while, and anyone that also isn't aware and maybe is a newer fan and wasn't around when chapters were a thing, basically, I believe from Folklore onwards, Taylor kind of started doing these chapters, which were 4 or 5 songs from the album themed around something. So it'd be
to help with streaming, basically.
Yeah, it was basically to help with streaming, and also because her Big Machine versions especially, you know, they might be on the standard version, the deluxe, they might be on a couple of like compilation albums. There's multiple versions of them out there, and to kind of compete with that, it meant that Love Story, Taylor's version, had 5 or 6 versions, even though they're all the same, out on streaming. And it was kind of a thing during Folklore, especially Fearless and Red Taylor's version.
Yeah.
And then they kind of created more chapters when they added on things like All the Girls You Loved Before, but often with the chapters, similarly to the Pen playlists or the Stages of Heartbreak.
Don't get me started.
The theming was always really clever, and every so often it they hit the nail on the head, but then it would be like, okay, you've only shoved that on there so that song gets more streams.
Yeah.
It was there was always something about them where they didn't feel
there's a bit of a half-heartedness to it all, right?
Yes,
there's either the theme is amazing, and then you've put songs that are like, okay, I guess I know why this is here, but it shouldn't.
Why
be
is we
here.
never ever getting back together in like the Heartbreak playlist or something? You know what I mean? It'd be like,
and
come
in
on.
that case,
like,
if you know which one you want to have more streams on, like, create the theme around it. I don't know. It just really.
Yeah.
One day we'll have to go through them and
we
make
will
our
go into
own.
those chapters.
Correct the chapters as we corrected the Pen playlists.
Exactly, yes, because some of them are quite frustrating and they are kind of a bit of a minefield of their own, but this kind of digital compilation feels more like a kind of chapter, really.
Yeah.
And I guess maybe it's quite helpful for people that maybe don't know what the Tortured Poets Department tracklist is, or maybe want to really learn those songs inside out, and there's a little playlist of them. However, often on Spotify and Apple Music there are official playlists of the Tortured Poets Department, so again it was kind of a bit weird, but
it's there.
It is what it is.
It's a thing. Yeah.
It's there. It's nothing to write home about. But
finally, that leads us to the biggest part of this episode, right? The most important part of the episode, which is
most exciting.
Yeah, the most exciting for sure, which is the Tortured Poets Department, the Anthology. At the moment, it's a Target exclusive thing. It is going to become available, obviously, for international fans as well, as Taylor said, soon. More information incoming, but the point is it is finally in physical format, which is so exciting because fans have asked for it for such a long time, right back since April. Basically, we've all been thirsting for it, and finally it has come. So here is everything you need to know about this ultimate edition of her 11th studio album. Firstly, while Taylor only mentioned the vinyl in her promotional video, the Anthology will also be available as a CD, which is good because I love vinyl. I think it's very, very pretty. I think it is a great collector's item. But for a lot of people, me included, it is a very expensive thing to get into, number one. And number two, not everyone has like vinyl players. And so it becomes...
the space.
That's it, the space, vinyl players. And it becomes like a decorative thing, perhaps, which again, fair play to anyone who wants to collect it as only like a collection piece. But for me personally, I prefer a CD version because I am able to actually use it, be it in the car or on a CD player or whatever.
And also it seems more affordable.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
And yeah, it takes up less space and it's a lot easier. And often sometimes comes with, a CD booklet and more stuff than sometimes vinyls, which are often just like, in a sleeve. Whereas not so much nowadays, Taylor puts a lot of effort in, but sometimes it can just be like a vinyl in a white sleeve and you're like, oh, okay. Whereas the CD has a nice little design booklet. But no, I'm glad that it's on both formats. And Taylor's, whenever something's been kind of released, not all the time, but often, it's kind of on both formats to kind of appease both kind of collectors.
And that leads us to something that we have to talk about as well, which is the look of it all. So for the vinyl, the album includes 4 marbled translucent discs and is accompanied by a never before seen 12 by 12 inch poster of Taylor. And both the CD and the vinyl obviously now have a different picture, a different cover to them. So we no longer have the Anthology, like the cover that is available on streaming that we spoke about earlier on, which is basically the Black Dog edition. We have a completely different photo as the cover. And I am so glad they did this. I'm really, really happy.
Yes, me too. I really love the cover. I'm glad that it's different because it means then the physicals are distinct and different, which they've done for a reason, because it means that, if someone went into a store, they might accidentally buy the Black Dog version thinking it's the Anthology version because they've got the same cover. So it's good that it visually is distinctly different.
Yeah.
And also it's quite nice. I quite like that it's got its own cover now, and it really fits the vibe. Yeah, it kind of screams very like, I hate it here. It's kind of more melancholy and quite like, sad, and I like the vibe. I really, really like the vibe. So yeah, I'm very excited for that. I can't wait.
And more exciting things include that both the vinyl and the CD feature 35 tracks. If you're calculating with us, bear with us, because that means that there's the 16 original ones and the 15 anthology versions, which add up to 31, which means that there are 4 bonus acoustic songs. So per target, that is all it says on the CD. It just says with 4 acoustic songs. We don't know any more than that. But there has been a lot of speculation and false information. So we're going to be speaking about that now in order to kind of like clear up what a lot of people have been saying and also speculate over what we think is going to be included in those 4 acoustic songs. So some of the information that went around basically is, well, Billboard initially put out like a statement or put out like an article about when Taylor had released or announced the release. They said that 4 acoustic versions were going to be the 4 live performances that were included in the extended version of the Eras Tour movie. They have since retracted that information because honestly, it just doesn't make sense. I think there was a bit of confusion going on behind the scenes.
As if she's going to shove like I Can See You and Our Song on the end of Torture Post Department. Like,
it's a bit random.
Like, let's use our brains. You know what I mean? Like, come on.
Yeah,
let's
I think
about it a little bit.
A lot of people ran with that because obviously it was posted by, you know,
an official,
a source that is quite reliable. And I think it said that it was like I Can See You, You're in Love, Death by a Thousand Cuts, and Maroon, because they weren't counting Our Song and You're on Your Own, Kid at all.
Oh yeah, because
they were already on the film, right? So they were talking about like these 4 extra performances that she added afterwards as the like additional versions tacked on to the end, right? So it just doesn't make much sense at all, really. It's a bit random to include that in TTPD, which hasn't got anything to do with anything. I mean, it's like a whole different thing.
Yeah, Taylor, like, you know, as much as she re-references herself, she never shoves other album track, like, you know, she's not going to shove a Midnight Song on the end of Torture Poets. Like, they're very, very different vibes and belong on their own respective albums.
So that leads us to speculate, what are these other 4 songs? Because if you have an eagle eye and have been listening throughout this episode, you will have realised that we spoke about 5 previous acoustic mixes from the Tortured Poets Department being released on physical editions of that standard album. That means that it could very well be 4 of these. Which 4? Who knows? Any guesses, Cameron?
Yes, this is the thing. It's like,
it's a bit annoying.
It's never complete.
I know.
There's always something missing. I would just prefer if it was just the anthology. But anyways, it's still exciting and it's fun guessing it in. If I was to guess, I would say if we were saying that it's going to be one of those acoustic versions from those physical CDs, I would potentially say that it would be everything but Daddy I Love Him.
I agree.
Because that seemed to be quite widely available.
Yeah.
Was pushed everywhere, whereas the Guilty as Sin, Down Bad, Fortnight and Fresh Out the Slammer have kind of been locked a little bit more and harder to get, and it means that now international fans will have more of a chance of getting access to all of those now. That's my guess, and I think probably is most realistic. Often, you know, like the Target exclusive of Midnights has like Weird and Wonderful string versions of like Sweet Nothing and stuff. And same with like back in the day, Speak Now, Target and Deluxe Edition had like Weird and Wonderful acoustic versions of Back to December and things like that. But if I was to guess what I really want, it would be the live versions from Paris and Stockholm. That would be what I would really like. I'd really love like Love of My Life, How Did It End, Peter, I Hate It Here. That would be kind of what I would actually really, really, really love to hear. That would be really cool.
Yeah.
But I don't know how realistic that is. What about you? What are you thinking?
So I think from the original 5 that were released, that But Daddy I Love Him, Guilty as Sin, Down Bad, Fortnight, Fresh Out the Slammer, I think I completely agree with you. The first one was made more available. There was much more surrounding it and it was posted quite a few times. Whereas the rest of them, the other 4, kind of were just like under the radar. So maybe that's a way to like get them out to more people. It would annoy me because there's 5. Why just stick the other one? Just give us 36 and complete something for once, please. Yeah. But yeah, either that or maybe Fortnight, because Fortnight was a single. It did have a single, you know, release. So perhaps that's the odd one out. But I think I'm agreeing with you. Live versions, I'd love it to be a live version. I really would, but I just don't think it is, because if not, I really do think that Target, instead of putting acoustic versions, they would literally put acoustic live versions, because I think it's even a bigger selling point than an acoustic version. So with a heavy heart, I do think it's going to be 4 of the ones that we've already heard. I do think it's going to be the 4 that you said as well, and But Daddy I Love Him will live separately to the rest of them once again. If we're very, very, very lucky, there could be new acoustic versions.
I was going to say, yeah, do you think that's potentially
re-recorded?
on the cards?
Oh, I'd love that. That would be absolutely the cherry on top.
That would be really, really cool to get those versions kind of actually slightly reimagined and acoustic.
I think that would be probably the best case scenario ever, but I just don't see it being very realistic, unfortunately.
Because I guess at the moment where these will be Target, often anything that is like a Target exclusive is a Target exclusive for a very long time. Like, Hits Different was in that Target jail for like over a year. Same with Poor Sweeter Than Fiction, that is locked away in that Target vinyl jail.
Yes.
It's never coming out, you know, so it's like whatever is on there is not going to be on streaming. I would
at least for a very long time.
Yeah, for a while. So I feel like those acoustic versions aren't really going to be missed on streaming because some of them are already on there, like Fortnite acoustic.
And the others have made their way into people's hands already, I believe.
Exactly.
Yeah, so...
Yeah. So I feel like, you know, that it's not a big loss, whereas if she did re-record and create new versions, I feel like they'd probably want those on streaming to push them and get those streams up.
That is true.
But then physicals, if you're encouraging people to buy, is probably going to do better for the charts anyway. So it's hard, isn't it? It depends how much time and effort and how much time really Taylor's got, and you know, I do not expect her to be doing any more. She's done so much this year, it's mad.
Yeah, to be honest, I would have just been happy with the anthology, and that's that.
Me
finally
too.
on as a physical version. And all of the songs there, Cameron, there's no leaving out Paris. No leaving out Glitch. All of them are there, which thank God for that. Whatever we get after them, as long as they was 31, you know, we were happy. After that, if there's going to be extras, we'll let them be extras. But
yeah, we can.
From the original, it's there. So thank God for that. The CD and vinyl will be available in store from November 29th, which is Black Friday, exclusively at Target and online from November 30th. However, more information will soon be revealed for international fans, which we are awaiting. Hopefully we get more information soon so we all know where we have to go to get this version, which I am very excited about. I know it's taken a long time, but I think it's... I mean, again, as always, there is an ulterior motive to why it's being released now. It's not a coincidence. It is the amp up to Grammy promotion, really, and Grammy campaigning.
Yes.
It makes sense. Yes. So, but you know, we get something out of it as well, which is good.
We've now come to the end of this episode. We hope you enjoyed listening. There are, technically, if you include the physical cover differences, not the vinyl and CD and cassette, but there are technically 25 versions, technically 25 covers. 25 different covers of the Torture Poets Department album, which is bonkers, and hopefully you can kind of get your head around it and it wasn't too confusing. But yeah, we hope you enjoyed hearing about all the different versions. Let us know your favourites in terms of all-time favourite live, favourite acoustic, what your opinion is on variants. We want to hear it all. Let us know in the comments. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed listening to this episode, and we'd also like to say a massive thank you as well for all the love on our previous 1989 celebration retrospective episode. Yeah, we're really, really grateful for all the love on that episode, and we're really, really proud of that episode. So glad that it's that you guys love it as much as we do. And as ever, thank you again. If you did enjoy, make sure to subscribe over on YouTube if you're not already subscribed. If you like this episode, then give it a like over on YouTube. If you liked it and you're listening on audio format, please rate us. And if you want to keep up to date with all things Swiftly Spoken, new episodes, then make sure to follow us over on Instagram. Our handle is @Swiftly Spoken Podcast. And until next time, we'll speak soon.